we have to understand that gold and silver was money before cash was.
That's
money,
what I'm saying,
right?
yeah.
And it has been for millennia. And we also understand that gold, for example, has retained its value. A top suit now would be roughly an ounce worth of gold,
Which was the same
as
as
the Romans, right?
Yeah.
With a toga, or if
Yeah.
you look at the cost of a cow, whatever it might be. So we're going from the gold standard to paper to now digital. Like for me, the way that the whole world changed in such a short space of time was a major eye opener. But again, even that didn't happen overnight.
It kind of didn't.
Yeah, but like the things that were put into place,
Yeah.
and then people, it took a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, if people feel that it's imminent, then get your gold delivered when you buy it straight away. People need to understand that actually leaving their money in the bank, not only does it devalue because of inflation, but there is also a risk of potentially, if there was a banking collapse. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hamza Almasyabi. I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called TheMinted. We're based here in the UK and hold an FCA license for e-money. We're essentially a platform that allows people to be able to trade in precious metals, and our goal is to make the buying of gold, silver, and other precious metals simple, safe, and more affordable. We are now, alhamdulillah, expanded into a variety of different countries, and we've also just recently launched our B2B offering, which we're very excited about.
How did you meet your partners?
So we actually were involved in previous business ventures. So
you've got a bond with each other.
yeah, and we understood each other's strengths and what value each can add. And if you've got a big vision and you want to build something, it's very difficult to do on your own, and it's very important to surround yourself with people that buy into that vision and also can contribute effectively.
I don't know any business that's successful that doesn't have a decent partnership. Partnerships is something that I've really struggled with because I've never been able to find a partner that I the values are the same and the effort and the energy and everything else matches up. You feel like it's like that when you're in there. It's a lot like a marriage. I used to say that to my previous business partner. He just used to laugh at me. But I always say that partnerships, and the partnerships part of the sunnah is the thing that they say that if you've got a healthy partnership, that's what brings the risk in. But you're lucky to have found.
Alhamdulillah. And I mean, I've been involved in other ventures before and had other partners and things like this. But you've just got to really assess what it is you're trying to achieve and who would be the best fit. Ideally from people that you've worked with before. The Prophet ﷺ says, like, you know people in whether you've traveled with them, whether you've done business with them, things like this, right? So I think obviously trust is a key thing, but sometimes you've got very sincere, trustworthy people, but they don't have the skill set and the capability. And sometimes you've got the capability, but at the same time, your values are not aligned. So
and a lot of the times they don't have either, but they create the illusion that they have both. You get a lot of that, unfortunately, especially in the Muslim community. There's a lot of that.
I think it's just general, but we say the Muslim community because we've got experience working with the Muslim community, right? But you'll find that, across the board. True. Just go onto LinkedIn and you find how many people will, a lot of it's full of hot air and masquerading. And
so how is this? Yeah, so this is the question that I've got for you about LinkedIn, right? Because you were saying to me earlier about LinkedIn. That because I know LinkedIn's very kind of B2B, it's more kind of serious conversations. Instagram, TikTok is kind of more kind of fashion or kind of But it just honestly gives me a nausea kind of feeling in my stomach when I go on LinkedIn. Just feel so nauseous with it. I don't know why.
Okay,
it's the pretense. I know there's pretense on TikTok and Instagram as well. But it's a different kind of pretense.
It is, yeah.
It's kind of more exhibitionism on Instagram.
Yeah, and lifestyle orientated. Here, it's more about showcasing, your skills, capabilities, experience.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do that in the hope that they can connect, and maybe get their next move up the ladder.
Yeah.
The reality is you have to sell yourself and your capabilities, right? And some people... There are, there's levels, right? So some people just take it to a completely different level.
Most people take it too far.
But, out of all the platforms that, that I've used in the past, in terms of being able to really kind of consume valuable information related to whatever field that you're focusing on, and also connect with industry leaders,
Yeah.
It's unparalleled.
Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of value there. So there is the element that you mentioned, but there's a lot of positive as well. And I think just generally, if you're looking to connect with influential people within any kind of industry or learn about a new industry, you're able to follow those people, and then the recommendations that it makes, and I think that also helps you find what you're looking for, who you're looking for. So that is
I
useful.
found Twitter to be way better for that. Way better.
Yeah. Every platform has its pros and its cons. Yeah. This is why they've all got the user bases that they have. I just think on a professional level,
the kind of
LinkedIn has carved its niche out there.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't think I know how to use it. I don't know. I've just got this mental block with LinkedIn. I don't know what it is. I just feel like it's too corporate, too something. But I know a lot of people. It really works for them.
Mm. Well, I can run you through it maybe.
I don't think it's. I don't think it's a case of not knowing how to use the platform as in terms of what buttons to press and where to click and all of that. I think it's just it's just a mental kind of block. It's just how it makes me feel. And I just can't get over it.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Like, how have you been able to get over it?
I mean, to be honest with you, I think the feeling is mirrored in the corporate world. I used to go into the city centre where I used to work for an international law firm, and you see people, in the morning, and everyone's just putting on a facade, and that feeling, I know what you're talking about. This is just taking it virtually, right?
Yeah. So that's exactly what I have an allergic reaction to.
Yeah. But that is just an element of the platform.
Okay. So you're saying there is something behind
absolutely.
the
Absolutely, there is substance there. 100%.
Because all I get is spam every day. I got people inbox messaging me, making stuff up about how they can change my life, and I know they can't. And making
a lot of that's actually automated. So there are tools.
You know who was one of the first people in this country to automate that process?
Really?
Yeah, I've got previous employees that they don't work for me now. I actually created an entire system when this and I was automating sending sales messages out. So if you want to blame anybody for LinkedIn spam, you can actually blame me, because I was actually one of the people that started it. Especially in the UK. We were selling consulting services on there, so we were inboxing people and stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the value proposition that we had was not that great. Otherwise, we would have had amazing success from there. Mm-hmm. I remember when I showed it to because I had an intern that was going to do that work. And when I showed it to him what we were going to do, he was just like, oh my God, how have you figured the system out? Because the tools weren't even available. I had to kind of wing it together to make it work. I was doing this in mid 2017.
Wow. No, there are some incredible tools, and you'll be surprised
just come out in the last couple of years.
How much information you can get on the company, on individuals.
I know.
It's
we
crazy.
Were doing data extraction and everything, and we were automating all the targeting. But the thing is, because I've been in that industry, I know the inbox messages that I'm getting. Because the thing is, I will get somebody that will read my book. They will message me, and I know this is an actual authentic message. Yeah. So I just read your book, or I really I just wanted to connect with you. But the rest of them, it's just all kind of cliched,
just selling stuff,
cookie cutter, very templated,
Yeah.
And you can tell even when they're kind of putting on the front, I just wanted to connect with you, get to know you, and then
people don't just connect.
Yeah. So that's the thing that really. Yeah. How are you getting past all of that?
In most cases, I'll decide whether to open the message or not. Okay. If based on the starting, I can pretty much tell, whether this is someone trying to just sell me something. And also I take a look at, just the headline, what company they're from, or what their position is and stuff like that. And a lot of the times it'll be like business development guys that just want to sell you stuff, or marketing, or some tech company based somewhere in the Far East that wants to build your next app or whatever it might be. So you just learn to kind of filter it out.
But are you finding it to be a good platform if you want to put information out there about your own company? Do you find it? Because I know there's a lot of people on LinkedIn now. They're putting a single post up and they're getting loads of comments. And how do you think? Because the thing is, I'm doing a lot of talking about like macroeconomy, right? I'm talking about this coming economic collapse. I'm talking about banking crisis. I'm talking about how we should move away from fiat currency and into gold and silver. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about like these kind of things. Do you think there's room for that on LinkedIn? I kind of feel like there isn't, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think people are entitled to their own opinions as long as you can substantiate.
Yeah,
any
substantiate
kind of
I
opinion.
can. But do you think LinkedIn is a platform that you can be having that conversation?
I have seen conversations like this cropping up. It's you'll always have people for and against,
Okay.
and there'll always be people that are opinionated and respond to your So I think just if you're going to post anything on LinkedIn, prepare for people to weigh in with their own opinions.
Yeah,
and
that I don't have.
and then you need to respond
Yeah,
to
yeah,
that.
in kind, yeah.
So you need to be
I
a
just
little bit
don't
more
think
active.
I think everything seems to be about a pulse. I understand the pulse on Facebook. I can further refine that if I want to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to understand the pulse on Instagram to an extent. Twitter, I don't understand the pulse when it comes to posting, but I understand if I want to find somebody, I want to learn from somebody, I understand that on Twitter. LinkedIn, I don't understand the pulse, and a lot of it's just because of I'm not allowing myself because of my allergic reaction to it. I'm not getting there.
Maybe, yeah. I guess it will come with time and a bit more experience, but you've got to break that barrier.
This is not going to happen. I've been trying for the last 5 years. It's just not going to work, I don't think. It's just not going to happen. But, okay, I do want to talk to you about economy and stuff like that. Because you're kind of... I know, because you and I had this conversation, about 3 or 4 years ago, right? I know you did have the intention, the whole reason why you went into... supplying gold and everything was because correct me if I'm wrong, you did want to go back to like the sunnah and you wanted to go back to kind of God's money and sell something. Is that true? Am I right?
So the vision was, Minted, we specifically chose a generic name because it's not just for a particular audience. What we wanted to do was to be able to make investing and holding and trading in physical assets safer, simpler, and more affordable.
Okay.
For everyone.
And physical assets, is that only gold and silver, or
So our vision was to fractionalize other assets as well.
Okay. Such as?
It could be anything. It could be property, for example. It could be a range of different metals. It could be anything physical. Potentially could be fractionalized.
When you say fractionalized,
so for example, let's just say right now you may own a gram in a kilo bar. Yeah. That kilo bar has been fractionalized, so multiple people have a stake in a partial ownership. In the same way, you're seeing many different assets that have been tokenized, fractionalized, to be able to make it more accessible to people, more affordable to people. And I think just the more people diversify, many people, for example, don't invest wisely. And I'm not here to give, investment advice, but I'm not allowed, but that's a separate. But what I'm saying is like a lot of people don't actually diversify their portfolio, and they don't actually understand, many people don't understand how inflation devalues the money that they do have saved. So they'll just think, okay, £50,000 in the bank is still £50,000. Yes, the balance is still 50,000. But what that 50,000 can buy you now has lost £5,000 over the last year, for example,
in terms of
right?
purchasing power. So I've literally just had at the time of this recording, I've literally had 2 videos that have come out. One which was talking about inflation, explain the entire thing. Very important. Then another one which was, if we want to get away from inflation, we have to talk about gold, right? Mm-hmm. But what I said in that second video, I've basically said that I don't know if you're having this issue, but I've gotten to the point where when I say to people we have inflation, the conversation's always we've got inflation because we've had this global event and we've supply chain and blah 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 and all this. Mm-hmm. And then the second conversation after that, when you say we need to get away from inflation, we need to move to gold and silver, I always get irrational arguments back. And my personal opinion, what I've started to realize is we are Stockholm syndromed by the current banking system. Like we're so bought into it, it's like a parent to us, that to have this conversation about breaking away from it is just too stressful, it's too traumatic. And there's also this concept of fashion as well.
I think first and foremost, there's an issue with the educational system and financial literacy. People don't understand money and they're never taught that. And I think that the beginning of everything starts there. So people need to understand, the ABCs of investing, the importance of, investing and diversifying, your portfolio and not putting all of your eggs in one basket, things like this. So like even with crypto and stuff like this, a lot of people lost a lot of money because, they put all of, or a large chunk of what they had into this next big coin that ended up, just going into the red, and so on. Same thing with stocks. So with anything, it's not a good idea to put all of your eggs in one basket. There are macro economic factors and many factors that are outside of your control that can impact that investment and mean that you're losing money, right? So you spread the risk by putting it into different asset classes. Even if it's a little bit, at least you're spreading the risk
But tell me about, like, what do you think is the primary cause of inflation?
Well, I think quantitative easing.
Okay, what is that? For the layman, what is that?
So quantitative easing, in effect, is basically just printing more money, more notes, putting that into the economy.
Yeah. But why does that see this? I've been asked this question. Why is it that when you print more notes, you print more currency? So if you've got $1 billion in circulation, and you print another, say, $100 million, why does that devalue each dollar? What's the reason for that?
So there's a larger conversation here, right? And initially the notes that we had, I don't know if you remember the older notes where it would say, "I promise to pay the bearer the sum of."
It doesn't say that anymore.
It doesn't say that anymore.
Yeah.
And even when it did say that, there was, we were backed with the gold standard before. So in effect, there was gold backing the notes that you had. It was just an easier way to trade, and at the same time safer, so you didn't have to, risk your gold being taken by highwaymen and so on and so forth. And then after the Bretton Woods Agreement, and people can take a look at that separately, things started to shift to what is today, the modern kind of banking system, the fractional reserve system. Now, if you're releasing obviously more notes, what is there that's backing those notes right now?
Paper.
It's just paper. It's literally more paper, right?
Okay.
And it's ultimately, we're just it's crazy how we're spending hours of our lives for this piece of paper that was just miraculously just printed or been decided to the chancellor or whoever it might be decided to release another billions worth or whatever it might be.
And suddenly the money that you had in the bank is worth less.
Exactly.
Because it has less power to purchase.
Yeah, and look, the Bank of England, for example, they have a target inflation rate of, I think, about between 2 and 3%, which obviously this year's far exceeded that. The official inflation rate is, I think it was like 10 point. It's slowed down a little bit now, but that doesn't mean that things have got cheaper. This is the key thing. It just means the rate of inflation has slowed down.
The acceleration has
That's
got
right.
less.
Yeah. So for example, okay, if over the last year inflation was 10%, let's just say,
and now it's 2%.
And now it's 8%.
Yeah.
It just means that things are getting more expensive, but at a slightly slower pace.
Yeah, they're not getting expensive as fast as they would have done. That's all it means.
Absolutely. Yeah. So ultimately, even if they stuck to the 2 to 3%, there's just a matter of time before the value of that currency just keeps going down and down and down, and you need a lot more of it, and then you end up with situations like Venezuela where you're all.
Do you your personal opinion? A lot of people know my personal opinion, but your personal opinion, do you think we're headed towards an all-out economic collapse in the West, or are you not at liberty to say? I really like your jacket, by the way, and your shirt.
Thanks a lot. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible.
Yeah.
I think the fact that major banks have collapsed despite all the regulation and all the controls and everything that are in place goes to show that it's not a fail-proof system. However, obviously there is a lot to lose. If such so we can see, for example, with the recent banking collapses, right? The government moved very fast to stem the effect of that and bailed out, other banks, so that it doesn't have a domino effect. So we can see from the reactions initially that, governments and central banks are obviously going to take whatever steps they can in order to limit any kind of damage that could do. So, is there going to be an imminent collapse that's going to happen very easily and without any kind of, resistance or countermeasures? I don't believe so. But is it possible? And over a period of time, because of a flawed system from the onset, will it ultimately lead to a shift in the way that the banking system works and things like this? Well, we're already seeing a shift, for example, with the the digital pound, let's just say, right? So we're going from the gold standard to paper to now digital. So there's already shifts that are happening, but that doesn't kind of, it's just a different format, isn't it? But ultimately, it's still the same kind of banking system that's there. And without real substance behind it, I think ultimately every bubble bursts at some point. What the alternative is, those are questions that, need kind of
What's
to be
your
looked
opinion
into.
on those? What is the alternative?
I think, look, I mean, I'm hearing many different kind of alternatives being banded, and I think conceptually speaking, an idea might sound good, but we need to also think practically. How can we implement something like this? And I think this is where a lot of people don't buy into something because they don't see the practicality. You know, when you talked about Stockholm syndrome, I don't think it's the fact that they sympathize. I think it's because it's the only thing they understand.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I'm trying to find when I use the term Stockholm syndrome, I'm trying to find a term that is the closest match. The thing that I'm saying is, this economic system that we live in right now is only. I know this sounds bizarre to say it this way, but it's only 100 years old, right? I know the Bank of England started in 1694 or whatever it was, but the economic system that we live in now is about 100 years old.
Yeah.
The way that we live our lives now, compared to the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years that came before it, was actually very different. We think that this is what life is, when in fact, what life actually was what came 100 years before. And this system's very new. In the history of civilization, you look at the entire timeline, what we're living in right now, there's a banking system, paper money, paying for stuff, having to deal with the effects of inflation, house prices constantly going up, millennials not being able to, new kids not being able to buy houses. This is all new. This is all, and it's not even for that. The effects that we're seeing of this is less than 20 or 30 years, which is a tiny, tiny little blip on the history of civilization. All the civilizations that came before us, or the majority of them, they had their issues, slavery and pillaging and everything else, the famine and everything else to go with it. But what we're dealing with here is actually very new and is actually a tiny blip on the timeline. So my argument with people is, let's go back to the way that civilization was before it. But and then the issue that you always get with that is that, well, it's impractical. You can't. Well, how am I going to send money? How am I going to send money to Australia tomorrow? It's sat in the UK. Well, you can figure all of that out. I'm not saying break away from technology. I'm not saying stop using technology. I'm saying the model that was in place, that's what we need to go back to.
I mean, look, we have to understand that gold and silver was money before cash was
that's
money.
What I'm saying,
right? And it has been for millennia. That's a fact. And we also understand that gold, for example, has retained its value. So, for example, to buy a top suit now would be roughly an ounce worth of gold,
which was the same
with the Romans, right? With a toga, or if you look at the cost of a cow, whatever it might be, it's there or thereabouts, right? However, obviously the cost of anything in cash, if you just go back 50 years ago, including gold, for example, right? There's a huge disparity there, and a massive difference, obviously because of the devaluation of currency. So I think having some substance that's backing your banking system, I think, is key.
Because the stuff's just made out of thin air, right? The money is
this case,
it's vacuous.
What is, other than...
Like, what's the difference between a £10 note and a £20 note, or a $10 note and a $20 note? They're just two pieces of paper. It's just different ink.
Yeah, and it's the thing that...
What do you say to somebody that says to you, yeah, but you can't buy gold, you can't eat it? I've had people say things like this to me. You can't buy and eat gold. Like, yeah, but you can't eat the piece of paper either.
I was just about to say. Look,
it's
it's a medium of exchange that's accepted by the people, right? The moment that people don't accept that anymore or see it as a exchange of value, that's the moment that everything collapses.
Yeah.
So in this case,
but that doesn't happen to gold, though.
No, it doesn't. Gold obviously has an intrinsic value in its own right, and it's a finite resource. You can't print more of it.
Yeah.
So that scarcity and its functional and physical attributes give it value. Right. So even
but
if
people say, what do you mean by intrinsic value? Because I've even had this conversation with people. Okay, but what's the intrinsic value on a £10 note? What's intrinsic? I mean, between the two of them, the intrinsic value between a £10 note and £20 note, there's no. They're both pieces of paper, and especially the stuff that's in your bank account, to go from to say 1,000 on your account to say 2,000. Where's the increase in intrinsic value? There is no increase.
Yeah.
But to have one bar of gold and then to have another bar of gold is actual tangible increase.
It is a tangible increase, and then also, with gold, it has its, like, you could make jewelry out of it, for example, right? It's used in electrical components. It has value in its own right.
Yeah.
So you can do as well as a medium of exchange. It's also something that has value within itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key thing here. However, look, there are already technology solutions that kind of use gold as an underlying medium or value exchange of value. There are cards that you can spend your gold holdings on. There are already a bunch of solutions that are out there. They haven't seen a massive uptake, in the mainstream, right? Yeah. But what they do allow you to do is to basically bring the latest technologies with the oldest commodities.
Yeah.
Right. To be able
Best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds. And I think any kind of solution needs to factor in technology and also the convenience side of things. So look, why did people initially accept to move away from exchanging coins and bars to paper? It was because it was safer, it was more convenient, right? Yeah. So you need to take the element of convenience.
But I'm not saying take the convenience away. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah. So
I think the problem is that when you say to people, let's go back to gold and silver, they immediately think what you're saying to me is I can no longer have you're taking all the convenience. I'm not saying that at all. This conversation is actually incredibly important because this affects everything. If people are having to work harder and harder, if the man of the house, for example, because people are always banging on about the man's a protector and provider and everything, these debates are running. Mm-hmm. If he has to work harder and harder, he's spending less and less time with his wife. He's spending less time with his children. If the wife then has to work, she's not able to mother and nurture the child, right? That entire family unit is breaking. And then that has second, third, fourth order effects. Yeah. The way that the tarbiyah of the child, what you can do for the child in terms of nourish and nurture, the emotional aspects of all of that, the relationship between the husband, it affects the entire family unit. This is the root cause of it all, right? Mm-hmm. But not being able to have that conversation openly, especially on social media, is a problem because we can't have that conversation. It gets either the algorithm pushes it down, or you get demonetized, or the channel gets stopped, or whatever. But these conversations need to be had because we are heading towards I personally feel we're heading towards a massive crisis economically, right? And which is why I looked into you guys, which is why I looked into Minted, because I was like, I need to find a company where I can hold my gold, because you're not always going to keep it in the house because you don't want to get burgled or you don't want to get robbed. Yeah. And I want it to be somewhere where I can convert that thing into cash immediately, because I don't have to do it myself. I don't have to walk into a shop and say, can you buy these gold bars off me? I want somebody who's got the mechanism that can do that for me. And that's why when I spoke to your co-founder, I was asking him I was drilling him, obviously not in a harsh way. I was asking him all the questions because I want to know. I'm absolutely convinced we've got an economic crisis coming because I've looked at the history of civilizations that have relied on paper money. They always collapse. China was running on paper money like 500-600 years ago, and the French were doing it, right? They always collapse. They always descend into a dystopian nightmare. And I wanted to know, is yours a company that I can rely on in an economic crisis? I'm relatively convinced, if I'm completely honest with you. I'm still a little bit nervous. I still think, okay, if we have an all-out collapse tomorrow, are you going to be able to come? If I've got gold with you, are you guys going to be able to come to my rescue? I'm like, I'm half and half about it. You tell me, are you going to be able to come to my rescue?
I mean, we've put everything. Put it this way. First of all, from an FCA regulatory perspective, any funds are completely safeguarded, and there are very strict controls in place to ensure that. As well as very regular reporting that we have to submit to the FCA. Okay. So that's on one side. But at the same time, we also understand that, people have different preferences and there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. So this is why we give people the option to buy and get delivery immediately if they want to.
Keep it at your house.
And they're more comfortable doing that. You can benefit from the exceptional rates and the and the much smoother user and buyer journey with Minted, and then get it delivered, and you can store it wherever you feel you're comfortable. For other people, they have that peace of mind where, look, it's securely stored, and I can at any point in time request it to be delivered when I want it to. And for some people, they just keep it in storage, and then they'll liquidate the gold that they have and convert it to cash, which again will be safeguarded for them in their safeguarding account until they request for it to be sent to their bank account, and that's done very quickly as well. So all the options are there.
When you have an economic crisis, right, things start working. Internet can start working. Power can start working. Things that were the same before, the goalposts move. A whole host of stuff moves.
Yeah.
In that situation, do you feel like? So I'm not asking you from a regulatory point of view now, not from an is it FCA?
Yeah.
Yeah, FCA point of view. I'm asking you almost completely from a character point of view. Have you guys got the metal? And I don't mean to kind of put you on the spot here, but you guys that are running this company, do you have the metal to look after us? And no pun intended when I say metal. I'm talking metal, METTLE. I know. Right? Do you have the metal to take care of us? That can you still pull through for us when we need you?
We have independent vaulting facilities for a reason.
Okay.
So that the supplier, for example, and the vaulting facilities are separate. Gives us a bit more control. Customers, when they buy their gold, as I said, we in the event of any kind of collapse, we are absolutely committed to making sure that people get what's rightfully theirs. There's
can
no
I
doubt
have your
about
address?
that.
Where do you live? I need to know. I want the address of all your co-founders.
Not a problem.
Before we continue on this video, I just want to invite you to my Discord community. Look, the world has changed, and it is changing still. And on my Discord, which is a simple mobile app that you can use, you can stay in touch with other like-minded people like me who are staying informed of the things that are happening around the world that are going to affect our daily lives very, very soon. So come and join me on my Discord community, and let's grow together and let's navigate this changing world order together. I think that would give me most assurance. The thing is that people are asking me, because everybody's saying people come. It's not that people come to me for investment advice. I'm not a financial advisor or anything, but people ask me, what are you doing? And I say, I'm doing this, this, and this. And the first thing that I always say is, I'm buying gold and I'm buying silver, and gold I'm buying with Minted. That's what I always say. I say, okay, well, are you ordering it home or are you keeping it in the vault? And I say, no, I'm keeping it in the vault because I want to be able to convert it into cash.
Yeah.
When things go south, I don't want to be in a position where I think when you have an economic collapse, you get a lot more anarchy. You got to worry about those kind of things.
You do.
But then at the same time,
I mean, there is only so much that you can do. But when you've put all the foreseeable kind of measures in place, and you have that commitment to ensuring that you do everything in your power. That's all you can do ultimately, right? Yeah. But if the world was to end tomorrow, there's nothing that you can do about that.
But what I'm saying is that, in that event, I want to be able to, I want to be able to rely on your company and say, okay, you know what, can you convert my gold to whatever currency is now taking off? Can you convert it into that for me? And, but the thing is, you don't know if things are going to be operational. We could be having power cuts. You could be having internet issues. So maybe it's better to just have it at the home, but I'm like, okay, I want a bit of both,
Again, everyone needs to make their own, decisions, right? Yeah. However, what I will say is generally, when you have global kind of events like this, there are precursors.
Yeah.
And they tend to build up over time. So it's not like everything just falls apart overnight,
that's
right?
True.
The speed at which the whole world can be affected, to be honest with you, can be fast, like we've seen with COVID.
Yeah.
Right, like for me, the way that the whole world changed in such a short space of time was a major eye opener. But again, even that didn't happen overnight. It happened.
It kind of didn't.
Yeah, but like the things that were put into place, and then people, it took a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, if people feel that it's imminent, then get your gold delivered when you buy it straight away. Don't keep it stored, right? If you feel that is the biggest risk. If you feel that things are for the foreseeable future are going to be okay, you can keep it stored. The physical metal that you buy will be there, and then you can liquidate it, or you can request delivery at that point in time. So we've kind of thought about the different scenarios and what people would prefer, and given all those options to people. So it's down to them at the end of the day, what they're comfortable with.
Okay. So going back to this conversation about currency, let's say this currency crashes, right? What do you? I'm not asking for investment advice or diversification advice. Just genuinely, just want to know your opinion. What do you think is going to be the new dominant currency that's out there? And in asking that question, have you heard about this whole BRICS business?
I have.
Okay.
And I know that
is that from me?
I mean, I've heard it from you, but I'm also familiar with BRICS, and I also understand that there are more and more countries lining up to become partner members.
Yeah.
Including, for example, Saudi and other countries. So
and they're planning to back this currency by gold. So just for the audience, basically the BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Yeah.
They've now got other countries that are asking to become members of this. I don't know what it's called. Is it called an organization or a collaboration or institution, whatever it is? Mm-hmm. And they want to be part of it. I think something like 83 countries have now signed up or applied for membership, which accounts for just under 50% of the world's trade. And this BRICS partnership, they are planning to launch a new currency, which will then be partially backed by gold, silver, and a handful of other commodities. Mm-hmm. So that currency will likely not be inflationary. What do you think to that?
I think if they can provide practical solutions with money that's backed by
something,
it's definitely a way forward, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Let's see how things go. Obviously, the dollar is devaluing; it's losing value. There is no sane person that will tell you otherwise. The facts are there, plain and simple.
And it's devaluing at a much faster pace in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And so too then everything else that goes with it, the pound, euro.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I don't think there's any, most people, apart from the people with vested interest and so on, most people would be up for something that's more stable, something that makes more sense economically, and something that still delivers on the practicalities and the convenience that the current monetary system provides. Obviously, if you're going to back with any kind of metals, there's a whole logistical operation that has to be looked at there. And then there's, from a supply perspective, of a security and storage perspective, an auditory perspective. Like there are new factors that you'd need to consider. But just because you've got to do something a little bit differently doesn't mean that it's something that can't be done.
But that also speaks to the present economic system where none of that is actually taking place, because you're just printing money out of thin air. So there is nothing to audit. There is nothing to regulate, really. You just keep printing more money.
I mean, that's in the public domain.
Society.
Yeah. It's
a Mini Cooper in 1967 was like $800 or $1,000, and now a Mini Cooper is $30,000. And they say, well, but the Mini Cooper of today has cruise control and it has ABS and it has power steering. Like, but it doesn't have 3,000% more worth of features and things, because it's a 3,000% increase.
Just look at, for example, the house is the same house. 50 years
ago.
I know,
this is what I say.
Same house, right?
There's on my street. There's plenty of houses on my street. So where I live, on my street, right? Because there's a lot of old people that live in there, and I'm not having a go at old people, but they haven't. And the kids have moved out, and they're just living there on their own, and they're just kind of in retirement age. Mm-hmm. So you look at these houses. They've had nothing done with them at all. I mean, right down to like carpets haven't been changed, curtains haven't been changed, same sofa, windows haven't. Nothing's been done to that house unless something's died in the house, like a boiler's died, and it needs upgrading or whatever. These houses haven't been touched. They've got heating systems that are 30, 40 years old, right? So, and the house has gotten grimier on the outside or whatever. So there's literally been no value add to this house, right? And the same that those houses have gone from, so that house on my street, for example, 1982, 1983, that house was £62,000. Today it's £550,000. Wow. But there's no actual increase in quality in the house. So what's the cause of that increase in price?
Well, the pound back then and the pound today is
it's not house prices. It's not as in, a real estate is a really good investment, because it's not. As in, that investment only works because of inflation. If inflation changed, if we went to a world in which you were, if you had money that was backed by gold and silver, house prices would stop going up. Because over time, that house is actually depreciating in quality.
I mean, you can't ignore supply and demand factors.
Yeah,
so like as
of
the
course.
population increases and there's a need for it, so that there will be an element of
Yeah,
that,
but not
but
to
it
this
won't be
extent.
to the same. Yeah, it wouldn't be to the same
A
level.
10% increase, a 20% increase, not a 3,000%. Like a tank of fuel in 1929, I think it was, right? A full tank of fuel was $3, and today it's about $100, right? And so that's a 3,000% increase. Has fuel increased by 3,000% in quality?
No.
Is what, 10% more efficient, 50%?
Yeah.
Maximum it's 100% more efficient. So that means it should cost you $6 to buy for a full tank of fuel.
And not just that, but the extraction process has become a
Yeah.
lot more efficient
Yeah.
and cost effective
But
than it was back
are they
then.
3,000% more effective? Oh yeah, so that gives you
So,
economies of scale.
yeah, exactly, right? And the number of barrels being produced compared to
Yeah.
back then, yeah,
So it should actually be cheaper.
you'd think so.
Yeah, so that's a reflection of how much it actually, how much the pound or the dollar is devalued.
Yeah,
It's just ridiculous.
absolutely.
But I would love to live in a world where you can, I think you must have seen these studies of like how a house is priced in gold. So I think now it's like 150 ounces, I think it is, to buy a house. 150 ounces of gold buys you a house, something like that. I can't remember what the exact figure is. And that number has actually been coming down. So I think it went up to, I think in 2011 it went up to like 160 ounces, and it's now heading back towards 100 ounces of gold.
Okay,
So in terms of gold, house prices are actually getting cheaper,
that's
and
interesting.
they've been getting cheap. And that's actually I don't know what the right term would be, but it's actually decelerated at a faster rate. So we're getting to the point where it's
Is that because of the rising value of gold in the market, or what would be the?
So if you're saying gold is real money, so if you're saying gold is real terms, then in real terms, house prices are coming down, because gold is real money. So against real money, they're actually coming down in price.
Yeah,
And the only reason it's going up in price nominally is because the dollar is devaluing or the pound is devaluing. So it's not that gold is going up in price because it's taking more pounds or more dollars to buy each ounce of gold. But the gold isn't actually moving.
yeah,
That all of that variation is taking place because of what's happening to the fiat currency, to the pound and the dollar. That's what's causing these massive fluctuations. But in real terms, house prices are actually less than they were 10 years ago. And you can do the same comparison with somebody actually did this with a McDonald's cheeseburger, I think it was. Cheeseburger or a hamburger, because that's also known as a constant. Because it's a physical thing, and they measured how many, I think it was cheeseburgers, how many McDonald's cheeseburgers did it cost to buy a house in like 2006, or like 1995, and then 2005, and then 2010, and now. And again, it takes less cheeseburgers to buy a house now than it did 10 years ago. So in real terms, house prices are actually coming down.
ultimately, in many cases, even if you use gold as a medium of exchange, eventually it gets converted back into fiat at some point, right? In the chain. So with gold appreciating in value over time, maybe at a higher rate than inflation, for example, in the last year, right? That may be what could be contributing to
so much money, because the inflation figures that you're talking about are the official inflation figures are based on the CPI, which is the consumer price index, and they only do that based on just a handful of goods that they track. They don't actually track house, because if they were tracking actual, I read it, I looked into it, they don't actually track. They track, there's a category that says housing, right? So you think that means house prices? It's not what it means. What it means is has the cost of running a household gone up or down? And then even then, it's based on certain metrics, but it doesn't actually track actual house. If you tracked inflation based on actual house prices,
a hell of a lot more.
It would be like 50%. They don't do that. So these are all mathematical manipulations, right? So so based on that, I'm not convinced that we've got a lack of inventory, or that's what's going on. And look, if you're buying a house in 2010 and you're saying, right, I want to buy this house from you, here's 160 ounces of gold for me to have this house, or whatever that figure is. And then today you're saying, I want this same house, here's 120 ounces of gold, and that you can buy that means, okay, this has come down in value.
Okay, so the counter argument is what I was trying to get to earlier on is it because, let's just say, the amount of gold, this house is 200k,
Yeah.
right? The amount of
200K in money,
in money,
in fiat currency.
fiat currency, the amount of gold that I need to raise that 200k, because gold is appreciated in value, is now less gold.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that the house has gone down.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the fact that
It
gold
takes
is
less gold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I am saying that, but also what I'm also saying is if you say gold is the actual real money, because fiat currency is just made out of thin air.
Yeah.
And if you're saying gold is actual money, God's money, real money, then in terms of real money,
it's
houses are cheaper.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So they're actually not gone up in price. So then, therefore, that they're not a good investment. They're not a good investment either. Like, everybody says real estate is the ultimate. You can't go wrong with real estate. That's actually not true.
Or holding that cash instead of holding gold may not be the best idea, right?
If I had held £100,000 worth of silver in the year 2000, today that same £100,000 worth of silver would be worth 500,000, right? So it's worth $500,000. But people say, okay, well, you could do the same thing with a house. If you bought a house for £100,000 in the year 2000, today it'd be worth 500,000. And I say that's not entirely true. In some cases, it is.
Yeah.
£100,000 property in London today probably would. Yeah, I mean, the flat that I was living in London, that flat in 2000 probably would have been about, say, 75k. And today that would be worth about, say, 450. So it's about. But if you go to a place where I grew up, like Rotherham, for example, right? You bought a house for £100,000 in 2000. Today that'd be worth 150.
Oh wow! Okay.
They haven't moved. Or maybe maximum 200k. They haven't moved.
Interesting.
So that's a lot more variable, whereas gold and silver is not. It doesn't vary in the same way.
Yeah, no, I can see both sides of the argument. I just think that
because you're being diplomatic. That's why.
No, I mean, look, we've got there is a track record for gold and for silver. That's indisputable.
Yeah.
And if you compare it against the inflation figures,
but you can compare it against the stock market. Yeah. I know, but people say, okay, well, you could put 20k if you put 20k into Tesla in 2008. Today, that's worth like 2 million. You can't do that with gold and silver. But I'm like, but hold it for long enough, and it goes back from 2 million back to 100k.
Yeah,
gold never goes backwards.
Yeah, there are fluctuations, but ultimately there'll always be a point of where
there's a maximum point, and then the same thing with Bitcoin. You had to know when to sell it.
The conversation here is not necessarily that you see gold in the same light as in an investment.
Yeah, I've always said wealth preservation,
a hedge against inflation.
Yeah,
and this is why a lot of investment firms or even advisors generally, they'll always advocate diversifying.
Yeah.
And they'll always, or in the vast majority of cases, they would suggest putting 5 to 10% of your wealth into precious metals.
Yeah.
A lot of the times because it has a negative correlation with stocks, for example.
Yeah,
or
but
at
investment
least
is designed to be a multiplier, though, isn't it? Investment is, I want to put $100 into something. I want to be able to pull out 150 or 200.
Yeah.
But I've never tried to have this conversation with gold and silver. I'm not saying gold and silver is supposed to be an investment. That is, if the banks fail, if you get inflationary effects, macroeconomic inflationary effects, you need something.
It's a safeguard.
Yeah, you need something that can preserve your wealth, because what's the point of you working it's not even 9 to 5 anymore. Most people work 7 to 7 now. The reality is most people are not working 25 hours a week. They're working not 40 hours a week. Most people are working 50, 60 hours a week in reality now, right? Even if they don't want to. What's the point of all that blood and sweat and all that hard work that you've done, that even if you put that in the cash in the bank, it doesn't store that value for you. It's not storing it. Investment is a separate conversation. Yeah. So investment, there's probably loads of things out there that you could invest in, and it could multiply your wealth, which I'm not an expert in.
100%. And I think beyond just the individual, organizations and, for example, charities, are sitting on considerable cash reserves that they will spend over time on projects and so on, but that money and significant money is being devalued just because it's sitting in bank accounts.
So what's the point of multiplying it when you can't even safeguard what you've already got?
This is the key thing. So they need to have a strategy that factors this into account.
You know, there's actual celebrities that are out there that have well-known celebrities that some of these banking collapses actually really put them into some serious trouble.
Yeah.
Because their money was stored in a bank that went and collapsed.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the point of all this fame and all this hard work you've done with the movies and all this stuff that you've done, and then that's like saying, well, I had some chairs at the house, and I had a dining table and some carpets, and then after 10 years they just turned into dust.
Yeah, I mean, you actually remind me of a key point here. So, the money in your account is guaranteed or insured up to a certain amount. I think it's 80 something.
Yeah, 83k
right?
in the UK.
83k in the UK. So if you've got $1 million in that account and then the bank collapses, you're potentially only getting back 83k.
It's just completely screwed.
Right. So people need to understand that actually leaving their money in the bank, not only does it devalue because of inflation, but there is also a risk of potentially, if there was a banking collapse, losing the vast majority of what they've got, or at least what exceeds the threshold, that £83,000. So that's an additional risk that they need to be aware of.
Yeah, but if somebody had 100 grand's worth of gold with you, and we have an economic collapse, where do they stand?
The gold is the gold, and they have ownership of the gold.
They still have all. So if they had say 100 grand, I don't know how much that is, but that's probably like, say
2 kilos.
Oh,
roughly.
it's 2 kilos. Okay, so if they have 2 kilos of gold with you, we have an economic collapse. What happens to that 2 kilos?
When they buy the gold with us,
Yeah.
they own the gold.
Yeah.
So we're simply custodians, but it's not on the company.
They still have the 2 kilos of gold.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, that's what I'm
and
saying.
wherever you go in the world, that's of value. And I saw social experiments where people had like a bar of gold and they had a mission like to travel to another country or whatever it is. And they were able to actually go to an estate agent, or not everyone would say yes.
Yeah.
But people actually accepted that as a means of exchange.
I've seen this with silver as well. You'll find that there's a lot of places you can go. You can say to somebody, "Can I give you this silver coin for this?" And they'll be like, "Yeah, all right then." Whereas if you give them like Pakistani rupees, they'll just look at it and go, "No." You know. Yeah. I remember when I was in Dubai, when I was doing my book launch in Dubai 2016. You remember when Brexit hit?
Yeah.
Brexit, I think, had just hit that year. I think. I can't remember now. I remember like when I went to Dubai about like a decade before, I think I went to like Saudi or something about 10, 15 years before. And I remember my dad used to have this thing, you get a taxi driver or whatever. He does a nice job for you, or you're going to a restaurant, they do a nice job for you. He would slip them like another £5, right? Yeah. And they would just light up because the pound was worth so much then. Yeah. I tried to do the same thing in this taxi in Dubai. I slipped him another £5. He just looked at it and he went, he just kind of just, "What's this?" And he just threw it back in my face. I was just so shocked because it's not worth anything. He actually considered it an insult.
Wow.
And I just thought, it was so embarrassing because I hadn't actually thought of that. I didn't even think about it, right? I would have actually been better off giving him, I don't know, five
dirhams or something.
5 dirhams or something. Yeah. There are a lot of people out there that will basically object to what I'm saying. So if I say, look, there's an economic collapse coming, there's a banking crisis that's on its way.
Yeah.
There's we could go back to a life in which you have barter or whatever. Okay. There's all these things that are going to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
When I'm saying that, right, I'm generally getting two types of responses.
Yeah.
One is either it's just kind of a blank stare, right? Which is kind of what you're alluding to. That look, you've been studying this, you've been looking into this and everything, so you can't expect them to understand at the same level of you.
People have to go through.
They have to go through that same process. Yeah.
And
that I don't have an issue with. Mm-hmm. Per se, as long as they are open to that conversation, right?
Yeah.
But those conversations have been very few, very small. So I've had conversations with some people, and it's maybe planted a seed in their mind. It's triggered a little something, right, with them. But on the whole, what's actually happened is flat out resistance, and it's not just flat out resistance. It's all, people have even gone far as saying to me, "What you're doing is dangerous." Mm-hmm. Right? You need to stop telling people that we've got a collapse coming because you're frightening people, or because you are you're misguiding people, or I can't even remember because obviously I blank it out of my mind because and basically they've tried to stop me from saying what I'm saying.
I understand. Yeah.
So I'm feeling like a lone voice over here is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling like, I know there are some other voices that are saying these things. There's some ulama, because I know you spoke to Sheikh Umar Vadila, right? It's people like him. He will speak very openly about this.
Yeah.
And he will speak with a lot more force and a lot more courage than I could do, and more bold, and actually be even more articulate than I can be, right? He says it with a lot more authority and with a lot more majesty. That he will say that. You've spoken to him. You've seen what he's like. But when he speaks, it's also very profound. And it's actually, and this is not criticism of him, but it's actually difficult for somebody to actually be able to break that down, what he's saying. Because it's actually a very profound, you have to sit with it. It's very heavy, right? My job has been to just kind of make it a bit more digestible.
I understand the message, and I understand the thought process behind your message, but I also understand how it can be a lot for people to grasp, and generally people will deny something that they don't understand, or they'll be averse to it, right? So people fear what they don't know, right? Now, if people are struggling, the average person might be struggling to understand the concept of inflation and devaluation of currency and how that impacts their day-to-day life. If they're struggling with that, just a concept like that, how can we expect them to understand something that's a lot more detailed, and also the fact that you've reached a certain point now, but that's come from research and a whole educational process. People need to go through that educational process. And as I said, the educational system itself doesn't really teach us about how to make money, how money works. That's a fundamental flaw in the system itself, right? So that's really where we should kind of focus on. But at the same time, when we're talking about a financial crisis, an impending financial crisis, are we not already in crisis in the sense that, like, have major banks not collapsed already?
That's what I'm
saying. Are we not facing hyperinflation and high levels of inflation globally? Like food shortages around the world, and people, like, there's already a crisis. I guess the only differences of opinion, nobody could say we're not in a crisis. It's just the extent of that crisis and what is the fallout,
and what direction is it taking?
Yeah, and what
is it going to get worse or is it going to get better?
That's right. And you'll have different opinions depending on where you sit and your perspective and your worldview. But the reality is, it can either get better or it can get worse. There's no two ways about it, right? So, as someone that kind of takes an objective opinion to things, I always think, okay, look, no matter how improbable something is, if it's possible, we should look at that possibility and plan for it. It might be your plan B, C, D, or even E. It doesn't really matter. However, don't be oblivious to it and don't get caught off guard, right? And for me, really, when that really kind of sat with me and is the events of the last few years, right, and how the whole world changed. In the space of months, freedoms were restricted and we were not able to go about our day-to-day lives, right? And how quickly that affected the whole world and imposed certain restrictions on the whole world collectively in such a short space of time. For me, I thought, like, that was a real eye-opening kind of event. And had anyone told you about this, they'd be thinking, like, you're talking about some sci-fi film that will never ever materialize. Yet it happened and we all lived through it. So we know that from this experience that no matter how improbable things are, if there's a possibility, try to understand it. And then where you can, try to take mitigating kind of steps to soften the blow if it was ever to come to that. Now, we hope that things don't deteriorate and things improve over time. But at the same time, coming back to the point about, empires, falling, that's a fact of life. And as I was saying to you earlier, one of the videos that I watched for Ray Dalio talks about the rise and declines of empires, illustrates it in a very, very good way with historical kind of facts, so you can actually visualize it and understand it. And I think the key thing is for people to understand that this is part and parcel. Empires have come and they've gone. The current empires won't be here, in a certain period of time, however long that is or however short that is, we don't know, right? But there are always warning signs when an empire is in decline or when a system is in decline. Now, even if an empire collapses or a system collapses, the key thing here is that the world doesn't end. Like how many systems and how many empires have collapsed? How many monetary systems have come and gone? How many, world powers have come and gone and powers transitioned over to an emerging kind of superpower? If you look at the facts, you'll see that we are probably in a transitionary period right now, just purely based on historical signs. Yeah. And again, for people, I would strongly recommend watching Ray Dalio's video on this. With that being said, the people that are best off are the people that see the signs and take steps to put themselves in a good position, so that when a transition does happen, they're not walking into something blindly and then have to react. They've planned for it, right? So what I would say generally is, look, in terms of from a financial perspective, even the leading investment advisors will always suggest that you hold some of your wealth in precious metals, whether it's to offset the effects of inflation, whether it's to preserve your wealth or whatever it is, as long as you're not looking at it as a short-term profit-making kind of transaction, physical gold is not the medium for that, I don't believe. Then, it's always a good strategy. Gold has a proven track record for increasing in value over time. Yes, there are fluctuations. Sometimes there are dips, but it's not as volatile as other asset classes, or for example, like crypto. So you want to make sure that you diversify and you have a mixed bag, as opposed to putting all of your eggs into one basket. So it's not alarmist. I think how we convey a message, and to the extent of which the fallout is there, that's subject to interpretation and discussion. But we need to understand that these.
But you do. I mean, you've said it now already. You do feel like we are going to get an all out. You're feeling it as well.
I feel that the current kind of banking collapses. Recently, we had SVB and a few other banks and there are so many factors. Whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it's fiscal policy. There's so many different things that are coming into play, and when you've got so many macro factors kind of converging together in a very short time frame, it doesn't look promising. Put it that way, right? Now, how much people want to look into that, or that's really down to the individual.
Yeah, I think I mean, I'm probably coming from a frustrated point of view anyway, right? But because the conversation is not allowed to progress, because I get met with a lot of objections, almost like a face to the hand kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Or a hand to the face, or whatever you want to say. I think if people were to continue the conversation with me, very, very few people have continued the conversation with me. Because what they tend to send, it's almost like projection. I'm saying certain things, it's triggering, it's very triggering. It's saying certain things, it's making them very nervous. Okay, we're going to have an all-out economic collapse. How am I going to feed my children and all this kind of stuff, right? And how we're going to keep ourselves warm in winter and all these kind of things. Mm-hmm. The point that I'm trying to get that conversation to is an empire collapsing, the Western Empire collapsing, does not mean the collapse of your life, because there will be a new empire that will emerge, and I'm actually quite interested in that new empire, and that's what people cannot reconcile. That's what they struggle with. Right.
Yeah. Which is normal, right? Because people, if they don't understand something, or if you're challenging their sense of normality, they fear the unknown.
Yeah, but that's also where I'm also kind of referring to the Stockholm syndrome as well. Is if you have grown up in a house and you have an abusive parent,
but you're used to it and you know it.
You're used to it and you know it, and when you're Stockholm syndrome, you don't necessarily understand the extent of the abuse. You don't actually
sympathize in most
because cases, you can sympathize with it, you could justify it, you can rationalize it.
Yeah.
You don't actually know how much you've been violated, so you're actually not even angry. But when you get out of that situation and you go into a new situation, if you get even a little bit of love, and you get no abuse, suddenly you start to see the contrast, and suddenly you are then angry about how much you were violated, and you're angry at yourself about how much you were violated, and I think I end up inadvertently, probably not even inadvertently, it's probably quite intentional. I don't mean to trigger people, but I am trying to get people to think. Is I'm creating that kind of.
So what? Okay, if you feel that that's on the cards and it's coming, what's your key message? Is it start to take steps to preserve your wealth and through gold, or what is it that you're advising?
So again, I'm not, same as you. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not I have my own financial experience and everything.
Yeah.
I have genuinely been saying to, because if I do a post on Facebook, I've got about 3,000 followers. I'm going to get about 200 people that are going to see that or engage with that in some way. And I've been constantly saying you need gold. And I've actually been saying to people, store it with Minted, because if you don't want to keep it at home, you can keep it with the vault and they can convert it into cash for you. And if you don't want them to hold it for you for whatever reason, then order it to your house. But at least you own it legally. Yeah. I have been saying that to them, right? And but I'm also saying that I'm not afraid, because as far as I'm concerned, this new whole BRICS collaboration, that's the new world order. It's a new multipolar world order, right? Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa. This is where we're headed. I think China and Russia are gonna lead that charge. But you always get this resistance. I don't want to live in a communist world. Well, we already live in a communist world. You just don't know it. The central bank digital currencies that are coming, right? This centralized banking system that we're going to get, this dystopian world of surveillance and everything that we're living in. We're already living in a communist world, and it's only going to get worse. We are living in a fascist society already. And we're descending into that further, but all the fingers are being pointed at China. China's not actually been half as bad as what the way that West is behaving, right? And then this idea that, China's this little devil, or China and Russia, they're not capable of leading us into the new world order. They've already proven that they're technologically advanced than what the West is. But I'm saying stop being afraid of it. I'm not saying that they don't have tyranny of their own. I'm not saying that at all. Whatever they're doing politically or whatever, all nation states have their own tyranny. I'm not saying that they don't have tyranny. What I'm saying is there's no stopping that world that's coming. And there's no point in pretending or holding on to this previous world that's been violating us and saying, no, I'm going to defend it to death because it's been violating you.
Okay. In terms of people defending it.
Yeah.
That's neither here nor there, in the sense that it can't prevent what potentially will be coming, right? So it really does not matter whether people want to accept that it's a possibility of a transition and take steps. That's down to them, right? And the more educated they become on the subject, they'll see that, look, just like everything in life, don't put all of your eggs into one basket, whether it's investments or whether it's and be mature enough to be able to objectively take a look at something, right? And in most cases, you'll always find that the truth is somewhere in the middle. People on one side are quite extreme in their views, and on the other side, again, it can be quite extreme. And the truth is somewhere, in the middle, and you've got to try and understand that. However, I don't think that people are scared of a new system. I think that people are worried about the transition period, because that's where the conflict happens.
Right.
That's a fact. Again, just going back to the videos that we were talking about, as one declines and the other one's on the rise, at that intersection, that's the area of conflict. And
that's true. I mean, even in history with the Mongols and the Ottomans and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that I agree with. To be honest, even I'm nervous about that, because you don't know what that's going to look like.
And no system or empire is perfect.
Yeah.
No system, every empire committed atrocities.
Yeah. No, I'm not denying that at all.
So I think when it becomes the new norm, people are going to be comfortable with it. But from that period to that period, there's going to be a lot of there's going to be some difficult times.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we have your company to help us, right? We can rely on you. And you're saying you've got this business offering now where effectively a business can effectively use you as a bank account, in the sense that they can store gold with you, right? Yeah. And then they can have the money that's in their business, they can have that stored in gold, and they can convert it back to cash when they need it, which I think is fantastic for businesses.
Absolutely. So look, I mean, Minted's taken a strategic shift. Not a shift. We carry on doing what we're doing, but on top of that, what we've done is we've built a brand new B2B offering. So this is for businesses, organizations, charities, and so on. So we developed a suite of different kind of products to specifically serve certain use cases, and ultimately ties in with our vision of making precious metals simple, safe, and affordable for the masses, right? So one of the products that we have is called Minted Connect, where a platform is able to or another financial app, let's just say, for example, they're able to plug in with us and immediately offer metals to their end customers. Their customers are now able to benefit from all, the value adds that Minted provides, including great rates and free storage and so on. And then the platform themselves have a brand new revenue stream. They've diversified their product portfolio. They've differentiated from competitors. So it puts them in a good position. And with Minted, we're able to reach a larger audience that way and, be able to facilitate things and add value from that perspective. Then we understood that there are some businesses, companies, charities that are sitting on large cash reserves. You're talking about millions, who have suffered greatly from the devaluation of currency through inflation. And we basically developed a product to allow them to be able to manage their cash reserves and be able to buy into metals and very easily, very quickly be able to liquidate into cash whenever they want to. So then this way, it helps them offset the effects of inflation and not lose. So for example, imagine a charity now, they collected $1 million and it was sitting until it starts to get distributed and projects to be implemented. Let's just say over a year, it's devalued by £100,000. If they'd invested that into gold, it would have been £1.1 million equivalent today if they liquidated it today. So
because you're doing all that hard work and it's just kind of evaporating.
Absolutely. And it's a responsibility, it's a moral responsibility, right?
Especially
for them to have a strategy
to
offset this. And it doesn't look like things are slowing down too much anytime soon. We've had a slight decrease in the pace of inflation, but inflation is a given. It's just what is the rate for that year. So there's that. And then there's also another product that we're developing called Employee Connect. What that allows people to do is to be able to pay their employees salaries or bonuses in gold if they want to.
Amazing.
So we're having conversations right now with a very large
I can't wait till you do this internationally. Then I'll pay my video editor in gold.
So already on the mobile app that we have, you can already transfer gold and silver to individuals.
Okay.
So I can transfer cash to you, gold or silver, via so if I owe you money or you owe me money, I can just send you gold instead.
But can I do that internationally?
Yes, you can.